Hi there, and welcome along. The topic of dahlia lifting was the hot topic on this week's episode of my new gardening podcast. The episode is entitled Dahlias and Bananas Oh My, and it's available for you to stream at any time on Amazon, Spotify or Apple Music. Whether you're keeping your dahlias in the ground or whether you plan to cut them back, there's some really horrific gardening tutorials going on Instagram and other platforms this year, so I thought I'd revisit the topic for you. Now, I tend to leave most of my dahlia tubers in the ground. Most of people will think that's a little bit lazy, but I think lifting the tuber at this particular time of year and then starting to cut it up and actually store it is really quite dodgy, and it's not something I would really suggest you do unless you're in a particularly cold place or your ground is very wet. Unless you're planning to actually sell the tubers, I don't understand why people at this particular point in time actually start dividing their tubers up. Every incision you make is a possible port of rot and damage. So I tend to leave my tubers in the ground and work them again in February or March time just before they start waking up. So the dahlias that are going to be left in the ground, what I'm going to be doing over the next week or so is giving them a thoroughly good mulch. With a contractor's woodland bark, which has got a really nice open structure, I'll heap bark around the actual crown of the plant itself, right down low, around 6 to 8 inches deep and around 18 inches wide, so about 45 centimeters in diameter. This pile of mulch will add as a nice warm woolly blanket over the winter months and keep a lot of the moisture off as well. During the spring, about late February, early March, I can simply peel that mulch back and expose the crown again, allowing it to come up and grow as normal, and the mulch will then just become part of the normal bed. I'll leave all of the foliage on my dahlias that I'm keeping in the ground that way standing until the frost comes, and then I'll actually prune them, and I'll prune them down to around 15 to 18 inches from the ground. And I do that leaving the stems quite long, because dahlias, if I cut one of these stems, are actually produced in nodules. You can see here, very much like bamboo, they have nodules in the stem, and if I cut that stem again, you'll see where the leaves come from, there'll actually be a divide in the stem, and it will actually be completely blocked in the center there, with only a sort of a hollow tuber through the middle. If you cut your stems too low and take them right down to the ground, the likelihood is you're going to actually be funneling water down the tube of the stem itself, right down into the ground, so avoiding the mulch and funneling cold, freezing water down into the heart of the tuber, which can actually be quite catastrophic. So what I tend to do is I leave the stems quite long, up to about 15 to 18 inches from the ground, and with the mulch heaped up with them until about February, March time, when I'll peel that mulch back. However, if you live somewhere particularly wet and particularly cold, this is the kind of time that you want to actually get out and start lifting your tubers. So it's difficult to know when to take them, but I think with the weather plummeting last night to about 4 degrees, it's had plenty of wind and rain, the temperatures are starting to plummet. Any tubers that you want to lift and store, now is the time to do it. So it doesn't matter if it's you or it doesn't matter if it's the frost. You want to start by removing as much of the top growth and foliage as you can. This is always quite heartbreaking to do, but it needs to be done. It's a little on the brutal side. Once again, I'm going to leave the stems fairly long. We're going to leave them about 12 to 15 inches long. I want something nice and strong to be able to get hold of and handle. I don't want to be actually being too rough with the tuber whatsoever. I say there's so many of these really bad tutorials on the internet at the moment that I thought that I'd actually revisit the subject and see how to show you how I do it. I'm then going to simply remove the supports. This particular dahlia is in a raised bed, and I'm going to want to plant something else in this bed next year, so I'm just going to remove the supports out of the way, and then it's time for me to make sure that I know what dahlia I'm dealing with. And that might sound a really strange thing to say, but the labelling at this point in time is really key. I know exactly what this dahlia is. I know in my mind, I've got plenty of photographs of it, so you need to make sure your labelling is sorted out. A plastic plant label, either written on in marker pen or in pencil, is best. One of the ones with a plastic hole through it that you can actually pass a piece of twine through, and then tie the label to the very top of the crown. Normally I tie the string nice and tight around the stems that I've left, which is one of the reasons why I've left these stems quite long. Then what you need to do is you need to do the really dodgy bit. You need to get your spade out, but this is the bit you need to take plenty of care and attention with. With the dahlias that I'm actually going to store over winter, I don't remove any of the soil whatsoever. I simply don't understand why loads and loads of people are going off cutting off tubers and cutting off roots. Leave them all alone. The tuber has absolutely everything it needs surrounding it to keep it warm, dry, and more importantly, hydrated during the winter months as it sleeps through till February or March next year. What you need to do is you need to envisage how large the tuber will be underneath the ground. What you don't want to do at this stage is plunge your spade through it and carve it up. If you damage it at this stage, the likelihood is you're going to lose that tuber over the winter and it's going to rot. This one's been in the ground for a couple of years. The tuber is likely to be quite substantial. So with a nice, deep, long border spade, this one is from Bergen and Ball. We use this for digging up an awful lot in the garden. Got a really nice long spade to it, nice and sharp. It gives me plenty of weight. Also a nice weight to it, which again stops a lot of the damage you can also cause to your shoulder when digging. So all I'm going to do is estimate the size of this tuber. I think this one is going to be something in the region of about 13 or 14 inches in diameter. I'm going to go round the tuber with my spade, plunging it full depth into the ground, and I'm going to give it a good wiggle all the time, working my way around the whole tuber. Now this is the reason why I leave these stems quite long, because in a moment I want to get hold of those, and I don't really want to damage the tuber as it comes out the ground. But you need to go all the way around it, plunging your spade in just as deep as you can, give it a good wiggle. You can see that's just about coming out now. Right, spade work done. I'm going to pick this tuber up by the actual stems themselves. Again, one of the reasons why I leave those stems nice and long. And you can see when I lift this tuber up, you can't see any of the tuber around it, which is absolutely perfect. At this stage, I want to inspect it and make sure I haven't actually caused any incisions. You can see the tuber is still actively growing. If I bring that towards the camera, there's loads of growth still coming up on it. But what I want to do now is I'm going to take that to the greenhouse. I'm going to place that on the greenhouse staging. I'm going to allow this plant to dry out for around 10 to 14 days. Exposed to the light, exposed to the sun. I'm going to leave it on the bench in the greenhouse just to dry up. And at that point, I'm going to pop it into a crate lined with newspaper. I'm going to pop an upturned crate underneath of it, and I'm going to stack my crates up in a frost-free environment. You want to choose somewhere that's dark. You want to choose somewhere you know is not going to drop below about 6 or 7 degrees during the winter. And I'm then not going to look at it at all. I'm going to leave it in stasis. There's nothing you can do if the tuber is damaged or rots. So there's no point in getting all anxious about it. Simply leave it in the crate until about February or March next year. And of course I'll be back to talk you through the waking up process about how I then wake up the tubers and divide them, replanting them from next year. If you have any questions relating to the subject, you can either listen into the podcast. The Garden of Ben podcast is available for you to stream anywhere, or you can drop me a comment below. I'll see you all again very soon. Take care now. Bye bye.